please say something.
Okay.
So you stepped into politics at a very young age. How did this affect you as a young person, as a wife, and later as a mother?
Well, my life was a little different than I thought it would be. I never planned to go into politics. It happened due to the political situation in my country. And for a long time, I thought that it would be very difficult for me to be married, or to have a family, or to have children. But my mother, who had an enormous influence on me, always believed that a woman should be married and have a family, and that children gave joy, and that no woman should be denied the joy of having children and having grandchildren. And so I listened to her.
And are you preparing your children to come into politics?
I have very mixed feelings about my children going into politics. Certainly I'd like them to have a career. Certainly I'd like them to do something which is for society. But I feel this can be done in many different ways. And I always tell my children that if you become doctors, I think doctors are, amongst the most noblest people, because they serve the sick, the injured, the people who are truly miserable. And then because I've had so many court cases to confront, I feel that, when I go to these courts, that they're dens of misery. There are all these desperate people who are very poor, who turn up to see their loved ones who are brought manacled and shackled. They can't afford lawyers. They can't really afford the litigation. Often in backward societies, the allegations are motivated, or a powerful man makes a false one against a weaker one. So I tell them, you can do legal aid. You can become lawyers, and you can help people who are affected. So I want them to do something for society. But I'm not sure whether politics is the only choice. Of course, if they decide for politics after their education, I'll support them.
You went from Oxford University to imprisonment in Pakistan. How did you deal with that transition?
Well, it was very difficult because I had the world before me when I graduated, and I was the Prime Minister's daughter. I expected to go back and to join the Foreign Service of Pakistan. I'd done a diploma in international relations. And suddenly, within a week of my return, the army tanks surrounded the Prime Minister's house. My father's government was overthrown, and he was arrested. The senior party leaders were arrested. The election campaign was on because they'd announced an election campaign, and the party leaders turned to me to be a surrogate. So I started leading the election campaign, and lo and behold, one day the police surrounded the house and said, "You're under house arrest." And that was my first arrest. I paced up and down. I found it very frustrating. But slowly, with the passage of time, I learned to cope because I saw my father in prison. And I remembered when I saw my father in prison, I remembered how we used to hear how his mother adored him because he was an only son, and how she used to make sure that the bed sheets were made of silk, and how she used to coddle him and spoil him. And suddenly I saw this man from such a privileged background, Prime Minister of the second largest Muslim country, suddenly living in this squalid death cell, and that his spirit never wavered.
But you were a woman. You were certainly more vulnerable.
Well, he was my father, and I wanted to live up to his expectations. I never wanted to disappoint him. For me, respect in my father and my mother's eyes was the most important thing for me. I never thought of what I wanted. I always thought that I must live up to them and to their standards, because they had high standards. So I tried to, and my mother was arrested too. And I remember my mother, I was with her when she was baton charged in Gaddafi Stadium, and I saw all the blood fall over her face. And it was one of the most horrific sights, when you're tear gassed and baton charged, and you're young and you're not used to it, and you see your own mother with blood all over her head. And then I remember she was taken to hospital, and she was arrested in the hospital. Then she was not allowed to go out for treatment. So I used to see my mother stoically facing the circumstances. I used to see my father stoically facing the circumstances. So I felt that this is the best way to face adversity.
But do you feel ever disadvantaged as a woman? You have been twice Prime Minister, yet there are in some places where it's you're taken as vulnerable because you're a woman.
I do believe that women in any profession are vulnerable. They're vulnerable to traditional taboos, to discrimination, to harassment, to insulting behavior by those who are male chauvinists and those who are traditionalists. And I found it. I mean, the accusations that were made were bizarre. I remember the rival political opponents saying that anybody who voted for me would have their marriages dissolved in the eyes of God because they had flouted the law of religion by voting for a woman. Of course, that was not true. And when I became Prime Minister, I saw that the military used to receive me inside so that they didn't have to salute a woman Prime Minister. And for me, this was quite bizarre because as a Muslim, I believe men and women are born equal. And as a humanist, I believe that men and women are born equal. And I found that they used to spread strange rumors about me, or they would like to say she's very westernized and she dresses in westernized clothes. And then in the 88 elections, they circulated some pictures of my face transposed from that of a model. So I got used to the dirty tricks, and I have a very strong identification with women who work. In particular, I feel very strongly about Mukhtar Mai, who was gang raped but had the courage to speak up, and her maltreatment at the hands of the regime, which banned her from traveling and once even exploited the war against terrorism to stop her from entering the UN. If they had not been involved as a key ally in the war against terrorism, nobody would have listened to them when they said don't allow her to enter a conference in the UN. But that's Mukhtar Mai, which is, a very extreme example. But even in smaller examples, like a recent incident when a female parliamentarian in a provincial assembly was subjected to gender harassment with one of the men trying to tease her. And I reacted very strongly because I feel this is not really about one woman. This is really about telling all the men in the society that don't let your women out. Because if you let your women out, then they can be made fun of, with chief ministers coming out and saying that women shouldn't dress like actresses. Well, women never turn around and say that men shouldn't dress like actors, although we see quite a few of them doing up their hair and dyeing it.
But there were a lot of expectations from your government regarding reforms on women's issues. Certainly, you also promised that you would repeal or bring amendments to the Hudud laws. That didn't happen.
Actually, it did happen, but somehow or the other we didn't get the message across. On the Hudud ordinance, we amended it. Previously, any individual could go and file a case, but we said no. The first amendment was that if anybody made a false complaint, the complainant would be punished. And secondly, we said that nobody could directly file a complaint, only the district commissioner could file a complaint. So we took the power away from people just going and randomly making complaints of this type.